Hello, I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Realizing Potential. I am very selective about the guests that I invite to the show. All of them are absolutely amazing. I'm a little biased when it comes to this particular guest. She's at the top of the list, but for personal and certainly professional reasons, she's my little sister and just an amazing contributor to society. And always focused on making a difference. And she does that in the political realm. I could brag about her all the time, but I'll let you become familiar with her in terms of what she's done since she's left the fine city of Albany. She is a native and gone on to do just some phenomenal things. And I'm excited to have the world renowned Miss Erica Savage Wilson. Woo!
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson, for those warm sentiments and that
My
welcome.
pleasure. My pleasure. So excited to have you. I know it's no secrets to the world that they know how I absolutely adore you and oh so proud of what you've been able to accomplish.
Likewise, likewise. And I'm excited to be on Realizing Potential and made sure to don my blue for the Unsinkable Albany State University.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your mom, my Sora will be delighted to learn that or to know of that. So we'll have to share the link with her. But let's tell the viewers, let's just kind of give them a little backdrop in terms of, your presence here in Albany, and then what kind of ignited your passion for politics and how that then segued. Now you have an amazing career. You're working for a firm. You have your own consulting firm. So let's learn what's been happening, but let's talk about the origins.
Sure. So I've come from a politically active family. I had family members that were involved in the civil rights movement in Albany, Georgia, where Dr. King was present. And it was not that it wasn't a success, it is just that the person that he was rallying against had studied his strategy, in fact, and Dr. King did acknowledge that. So having that background of family members that were involved in the movement, and then really growing up being very much so freely led to have political discourse in our family. One of the things that I love sharing with people, and just like young people, when I have the opportunity to talk to them, is that the household that we grew up, my father was an active duty Marine. I know you and I share that in common, that military, particularly Marine lifestyle. And my
Mhm.
mom was an educator. And so, what we were challenged to do is once a week to come to the table having learned a new vocabulary words, and this is not making up. My parents were very much so sticklers of that. And then reading what we called current events at that time and being able to talk about that particular article or the pieces that we read. And so later in life, I began to engage in political activity, worked on some local campaigns, did some state campaigns, and then went on and had the fine opportunity to work a congressional campaign and also act as a surrogate, which is something that really rests in my heart, being able to talk to people within the community and within districts to hear what it is that they had to say, and then talk about what the candidate, the incumbent, um, their messaging for how they were going to continue to either prioritize that community or what the list of priorities were and what I needed to bring back to the candidate. And so, through all of that work, attended a political boot camp, uh, met with some people, had just really, really great conversation over a week long period. And unbeknownst to me, there were discussions about me just interacting with these individuals and institutions for a week. And actually, around Thanksgiving of 2016, I received an email that said, "Hey, how are you doing?" from someone that runs a progressive organization, and said that, "Listen, there is an opportunity here in DC. We thought of you and thought you would be a perfect fit as director of this particular political firm. Would you be interested?" And mind you, these are people that I only had the pleasure of being around for a week. And so, with that, that really brought me into DC and really opened up the door for me to be able to do what I enjoy doing, which is talk politics, read politics, and discuss politics. And from that, I created my platform, Savage Politics, in those different iterations that has been successfully consistent over the past 3 years. And I have done international work in politics, met with presidential and state leaders, and then also just continuing to message and bring people below the fold, such as in Albany, where there's not really a connection between what is happening locally to what's happening nationally, and be able to talk about that freely 3 days a week, both on broadcast through social media and on television as well.
Yes. So I brag about you all the time, behind your back, to your face, all of that. But you brought up a couple points. One, you reminded me of an old adage, I may not get it verbatim, but it basically says it's not about who knows, it's not about who you know, but who knows
Mhm.
you. And
Right.
so I remember that moment oh so well. I think that's same time we were going through hurricane. I don't know if it was Hurricane Michael or one of those
Hmm.
infamous weather systems that came through Albany, and you decided to make a major shift and leap. And that is one of the many things that I have great respect and admiration for you about is your bravery and your courage. And so you birth it in your mind and you go for it. And that is to be celebrated and lauded. The other thing, I was on a conversation yesterday with an executive coach, and one of the words that we both kept exchanging back and forth was the word germinate. And so, what I
Mm.
love, your evidence of what your parents seeded into you is now
Hmm.
germinating or has germinated and now coming to fruition, and we're seeing the fruits of that. And so that is just so important. I know a lot of times people want to harper on the negative, or my mom didn't do this, or my dad didn't do this. But the universe will usually, if that's something that you want to pursue, will put the right people in your place to help develop that. So thank you for
Absolutely.
providing evidence in that. I'd like to know a little bit more. You discussed about or presented the origins of the whole political acumen, and you're just really wedded to that and cemented to that, and you were very, very passionate about that. Um, I know, and I don't want to harp on the negative of this moment. I'm trying to glean in this political climate the positive out of it. It is a challenge.
Mm.
It is an absolute challenge.
Yeah.
But in comparison to historically, how does this differ, or is this, in terms of all of your studies, is this the most unique time that you've ever seen as it relates to a political race?
It certainly is, Dr. Wilson, as you so eloquently said. It is. We're definitely in unprecedented times, but
Mhm.
history shows us that we've been here before. One of the things that I think is really something to glean joy from is that the people who are actively voting, there have already been well over 3 million votes casted ahead of the November 3rd election day. And that is something to be celebrated, particularly when we look at the 18 to 29 demographic, and that is the youth vote and tends to underperform. We're seeing youth become activated. We're also seeing that youth are volunteering to sign up to become poll workers, because normally we see poll workers, usually the grandparent generation, those people who have always been politically connected and have been civically engaged. And to see the infusion of folks that are in our generation, those people that are in the millennial and in the Gen X, Gen Z generation, is something really to be celebrated. Also, we're seeing voter registration, even during this COVID pandemic. We're seeing that those efforts are really taking off as well. People are thinking of really, really creative ways to do that. I was on a call on yesterday, and one of my colleagues brought forward in another project that I'm involved in. They shot a video, and the purpose of shooting that video in Pennsylvania was to engage people around a party at the ballot box. And what they did was really walk through how, in fact, you do make sure that your ballot is completed the way that it needs to be, accordance with Pennsylvania Secretary of State standards, because we don't have universal election um, precedents that set. Every state is very much so different, and that they use people that were very much so a reflection of the people that are in that community. And so to see that people are doing fantastic um, efforts like that, and that's just one of many examples. Says to me that even though, as you mentioned, we're there's a lot really to kind of have some glum around, but to see how people are really getting out the vote and they're taking it not only upon themselves to do this, but joining with other organizations, texting is something really to be celebrated in this moment.
It is indeed. And speaking of texting, I sent a text to your nephew probably about an hour ago, and I said, next week is early voting. Let's get our schedules aligned so that we can go and do that downtown. That's so important. And because this is
And if I
just,
could, I'm so
yes,
sorry to interrupt you, that you brought up my nephew. I'm so glad that you do that. I brought him forward, and I do bring him forward when I'm talking with different groups, with different people, to talk about, I remember that you sent us a picture, family, a picture of him engaging and voting, and how the night and day difference between when he went into the booth and then when he came out, that pride that he had. And I'm like, you're talking about an 18-year-old young man. That energy is contagious. And so that again is when I'm talking about the youth vote and what we have to celebrate and be excited about. He is a really, really great example that I use throughout many of my talks to let people know that, listen, the young people have something to say and they're saying it. And we definitely need to make sure that we're continuing to encourage them and so many others to vote.
well, I'll definitely remind him or share that with him as I have in the past. He's certainly proud of what you continue to achieve on a daily basis. So I'll share that you were using him in your conversations throughout the country as we get through this moment. And again, I'm trying to take a very positive approach to it. As you just mentioned, people are galvanizing and uh, folks that have been naysayers about the whole voting process are coming out because they understand what the possibilities are. And so it's that whole piece about you cannot complain if you have not taken an active role in making a difference. So that's certainly so very critical. You do this on a daily basis. You eat, breathe, and sleep politics, and I stay on you about the work life balance because it can be an onslaught, and then you play a role or you're active in that whole media life as well, and that can be absolutely draining. But I know in terms of how you keep yourself motivated and encouraged and keep abreast, you focus on certain individuals who have been trailblazers and titans in the political arena. Will you share some of those individuals that kind of keep you motivated and then provide a source of inspiration for you?
Sure. And I'd like to first bring forward the name Fannie Lou Hamer, particularly because her 103rd birthday was just yesterday.
Oh my
And that's
goodness.
something, yeah, I know. Like, we
Yeah.
had that person walk here on the earth. And I bring her name forward because there are other people, Septima Poinsett Clark, Diane Nash, Ella Joe Baker. To bring it forward to the modern times, we have folks like Roland Martin that continue to do the work pounding the ground. One of my good sister friends that I've made acquaintances with because we do a lot of media work together, Reese Colbert. And there are just so many other people. There's your Angela Rye, the Brittany Packnett Cunningham. And these are people that are very much so well rounded, right? They have been involved by way of activism. Tamika Mallory, who definitely keeps it moving on the ground. All of these powerhouse of people have definitely had to blaze a trail in their own right. And going back to our great pioneer, Fannie Lou Hamer, one thing that I really love and point out to people is that Ms. Hamer got involved in voting rights activism at the age of 44 years old. And I think that it's very important when you consider she had so many children. She was sharecropping at the time, but she took a stand to say that, listen, if I can no longer be a person that brings along with my husband provisions for this family, I'm fine with that because she learned about Black people having the right to vote at the age of 44 and got activated. She almost also lost her life because of a brutal beating that ensued on their way back from engaging in voter education. So I say all of that to say this fine point, that when we talk about the youth vote or anybody else, as you so well put it, if you don't participate, you don't have a voice. One of the things that I say to people, two things, that there are no undecided voters, there are only unregistered voters. Bring the conversation to those individuals because we all want to be courted, right? Talk to people about, listen, if you're not registered to vote, I'd love to be a part of walking you through that. And let me tell you why that's important. And the second thing that I share with people around that as I'm walking through them with that is that, listen, I am helping you build your house, particularly for the 18 to 29 group. The 18, really kind of like the mid 20 group. This is your house. This is your world. What do you want it to look like? Do you want it to see replicated where there are more people that are on the fence, so to speak, about engaging in an active, healthy democracy? Or do you want a house built with people that do engage that democracy? It doesn't matter if you agree about what you believe is democratic and what's not, that they are in fact engaging in a healthy way. And so to bring it that way for people to visually kind of have the understanding that this is for them, this is for their future. And their future is tomorrow. Their future is later on that day. It's not always 10, 20 years down the line, even though politics, the act of being involved in the body politic, it does take time. But we're talking about building on precept upon precept. So those are a couple of things that I like to hone in on and give back to a person who may be unregistered. And I have seen the joys, much like the joy of my nephew, being casting that first vote. So whether a person is 18 or whether they're like our dear sister Fannie Lou Hamer that started blazing trails at the age of 44, that held a nation captive when President Lyndon Baines Johnson wanted to try to take the attention away from her when she was testifying in Atlantic City, New Jersey, about what she'd endured and why voting rights that were already made available but oppressed by forces that would have it be, that it was important that it be really extended to everyone else. Now, Poinsett, Miss Septima Clark, who created the citizenship schools, she and her husband, so that folks could learn how to read so they could pass, unfortunately, literacy tests in order to cast the ballot. So bringing that history and then involving people in that history, I've seen the night and day change. And that's literally what people want. They want to have someone speak with them one on one and talk to them about why they are, as you said, wed into what we're seeing or what we want our future to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so, and I love your terminology in terms of being courted. We want to be recognized. We want to be acknowledged as a citizens of this world. And so, and not be viewed as a matter of convenience. And so you acknowledge me when it serves you.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot to that. So absolutely, just acknowledge me. And so that is why we, and I love, and I hear you talk about this all the time, where there's such a push and a drive for voter suppression, because individuals at power base, they understand what it means to maintain that power, and that if it is then shared, that there's a shift, and then you have to then consider or open up the doors in terms of equity. So I totally agree. We're going to take a quick break because I want to delve more into you. You keep your, you have 2 feet, but some days I wonder if you have 10 because you have your foot in this door and that door. So I certainly want to talk about the consulting firm that you work for and the international work that you did in South Sudan, if we could briefly talk about that. And then, of course, we have to devote some time to savage politics and how people can reach out to you and you can just share what's on the horizon and what that savage politics portfolio looks like. So we'll take a quick break and then learn more about the great work of the Erica Savage Wilson. We'll be right back, viewers.